Hello everyone, Alexander Flores here, and welcome to episode 13 of Creating a Software Company. In this video, we're going to allow our users to enable multi-factor authentication through the Google Authenticator app. So we're going to start here with MFA.ejs, and I'm going to create a basic form. So we have a basic H1 tag that's just going to say scan with Google Authenticator. This will be above the QR code, and we're doing this because it may not be super clear what to do with the QR code. Then we have a div that's going to hold the QR code. We're going to populate this HTML with JavaScript later on. And then we have the actual form. So inside we have the code, which is what the user will enter what they see on their phone. And then they have the password, just to confirm that they actually have access to this account. Also, we need access to the password on the back end. And then we have a div that's going to hold all the errors like we have been using. And then finally a submit button. Pretty standard. Now, similar to the last video, I have one or two selectors in this file for the CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and add those now. Okay, so this is just going to make the H1 and the QR code centered. Then we're going to target the form itself and tell CSS Grid where to place the certain elements. And then we're going to tell CSS Grid how to treat the text, which is the code. And so this is, pretty standard compared to what we were doing in the last video. Just trying to extend basically what's in the account without creating an extra file just for a few selectors. Now at the bottom of the body, we're going to import some JavaScript. So I do have jQuery in the scripts folder, so let's import that first. Source equals scripts jQuery.js. Then we're going to write our own JavaScript here. So we're simply going to have a document ready, and then we're going to get from MFA/QR code, and then we're going to say then. In this callback, we'll handle that in a few seconds. We also want to catch an error that might occur. We're simply going to pass in this, which will pass in the error to that method. Then we are going to target the QR code right here. Let's copy that, and then let's target this ID and set the HTML to an image tag that's going to have the source of data. So this is going to be an endpoint that we listen to, and then we're going to return an image URL that will allow us to display the QR code. So in order to do that, I need to create a new file. We'll call it mfa.js. And then let's also go to our accounts file and start listening to it here. So let's require account MFA and then router. So then let's go into here and let's do module.exports. So this is very similar to the last videos we've been doing. So we're just having all the MFA based routes inside this file, and then we're actually passing in the router to use by doing this line right here. So there's going to be two packages we want to install, which is SpeakEasy. Then we need to import the utility, and then we're going to create a name variable. This is what the user is going to see on their phone once they actually scan the QR code. So now we're going to start off simply by listening to GET requests on MFA request response. We're going to make sure that we're logged in. If not, request.session.sub return response.redirect/login. Then response.render account/MFA. We're going to pass in two variables, verified, which will be request.session MFA verified, and then also errors, which will be request.session MFA errors. Let's go ahead and save this. So we need to listen to a GET request for MFA QR code. Router.get MFA QR code request response. So now in here, we're actually going to use this SneakEasy package, which I will also link the NPM documentation to in the description if you guys want to read through that. But we're going to create a variable called secret, and then we're going to pass in the name, which is defined right here. And that's going to be what the Google Authenticator app sees. Then we're going to store it to the session if it has not been stored before. If not, request.session temp QR code secret. I'm going to copy and paste this. So if that doesn't exist, then request.session temp QR code secret equals secret.base32. So this is in the documentation, and it's going to allow us to access this secret later on, which you'll see later on in the video how we're going to be using this. Now we're going to want to call a method that's in QR, which is what we imported up here for the QR codes, called toDataURL. Then we're going to pass in secret.otpauth_URL, and then a callback, which will handle if something went wrong, or the URL for the image to pass back. So here we can simply say response.send. If there's an error, then let's send error. Otherwise, let's send data. Let's go ahead and save this. And then let's go over here and let's refresh. Okay, so now we see we have a QR code rendered on the screen. I'm going to open up the Google Authenticator app. I'm not going to be recording this part, but if you've used Google Authenticator, you know exactly what's going to go on. I'm going to click on the red plus to add. Let's scan a barcode. Let's hold this up to the screen. And then it added it has our name displayed, and then it has our temporary token. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Okay, so now we're going to listen to post requests to /MFA. So we have request, response, and this is simply going to listen to the form submission from the HTML here. So we're going to get access to the code and the password. So what we want to do here is we want to see if they're logged in using request.session.sub and not request.body.password. So although we are specifying that this is required, I always want to double check everything on the back end as well. So with this, we could say request.session MFA errors.push, and then we could say, please provide your password. We also want to make sure we're making this an array. And then we're going to return response.redirect back to /MFA, which will then display that error, and then hopefully they'll actually enter their password. This is rarely going to be used, if ever, but always like to be safe and double check things on the back end as well. So now we're going to create a variable called code, which will be from request.body.code, which is the authenticator code that they entered right here. So that's the 6-digit code that they should see on their phone. We want to make sure that this is valid. So if not code, request.session MFA errors.push, please provide your Google Auth code, and then we will simply copy this right here to redirect back to the multi-factor authentication screen. So now we're going to make a variable called verified, which will be from speakeasy.totp.verify. We're going to pass in an object. We're going to pass in the secret, which is what we stored in the session right up here. So let's copy this. And we notice that we see base 32 right here. We're going to pass in encoding, which will be base 32, and then token, which will be the code that the user passed in. Now up near the top, we are passing in this verified variable. We want to set that to true. And just to be safe, we do want to convert this into a string. Okay, so now we want to see if the user is logged in, if request.session.sub. So we're going to add some more logic here, but first we also want to say if the user is not logged in, we simply want to redirect to MFA for now. We're probably going to be redirecting them back to where they came from. So now here we're going to create a variable for username, which will be request.session.sub. And then we want a variable for the password, which would be request.body.password. Then login details equals username, password, and then we're going to create authentication details, new Amazon Cognito identity.authentication details, and we're going to pass in login details. Now we're going to create user details. We'll pass in username and then the pool, which will be from util.userpool, which is why we imported that file. And then we're going to create a Cognito user. Now we're going to need to authenticate our Cognito user, make sure that they're logged in. So authenticate user, we're going to pass in the authentication details, and then a object which will have on success, and another function here that will have on failure. So now on success, this is where we've already authenticated the user, and then we're going to go ahead and set a custom attribute, read and write permissions. So I recreated the user pool and I added a MFA attribute here. I don't want to use the default multi-factor authentication because I believe that that's just SMS based, and I don't want to use text message based two-factor authentication. I'd rather strictly just use Google Authenticator. So I added this attribute, and we can read it and we can write it. So whenever we're accessing this or writing to it, we have to use this exact name, which is custom::MFA. So here, let's create a new variable called MFA attribute. The name will be custom, what we have right here. So if they enter the correct code, then this would be true, otherwise it would be false. Okay, so let's make an attribute variable. New Amazon Cognito identity dot Cognito user attribute. And let's pass in MFA attribute. And then let's update the attribute for the user. So Cognito user dot update attributes. We're going to pass in an array, which simply just holds the attribute variable. And then we have a callback which has error and data as its parameters. Now, if we made it this far, then we have successfully updated the attributes. Now we want to globally sign them out to force them to log in again. Let's click on confirm code. Takes me back to the login, and then if I check the user, we see that it says custom MFA is now true. So now whenever we go to log in, we could check if this is the case. And then if it is true, we can ask for them to give us the code again. Okay, so what we could do now is under login, we can say cognito user dot get user attributes. And this takes a callback which has error, and we'll call it attributes. Now let's simply say return response.send attributes. So after logging in, we see this. And so what we can do is we can loop through all these and check if name equals custom MFA, and then we can check the value there. So we can do that by looping through all of them. Okay, so some things might look different because I stopped the recording because I was running into quite a few issues, but I finally got it working here. So what we're going to do, just to recap, is we're going to authenticate the user like normal because we're under login, and then we're going to get the user attributes. If there's an error with this, we're going to display that. This is unlikely to happen. But then we're going to loop through the user attributes and find one that says custom MFA. If that does exist, and if it is true, then we're going to go ahead and try to authenticate. So right now I am just hard coding in the secret. Normally you want to save this to a database, but we haven't set up DynamoDB yet, so we'll be doing that soon. But for now, I'll hard code this in and I'll change it soon. Then we're taking what we passed in through the form and we're trying to verify it. So then we're saying if you're not verified, then we're going to say that there's an invalid Google Auth code and then redirect them to login. However, what I want to do here is actually break, so we stop looping through the attributes once we find this one. Then we're going to set the sub and redirect to the dashboard like normal. So here I am, my code's about to reset. Let's type in the new one. 657211. Let's log in, and we see that we should go to the dashboard. Okay, so that's good. Now let's, oops, wrong file. Let's log out by saving this to reset it, because I don't actually have a log out method yet. So let's go to login, and then, okay, here it is. Let's enter a random code. Let's try to make it 6 characters. And then let's log in, and it says invalid Google Auth code. So now if this is enabled, then they have to enter this while logging in. And so that is it for this video. Thank you for watching.